Hello and welcome to Miss Bailey's Daily Dose. Today I'm going to be reading part of our new book, The Enchanted Wood, and then we're going to be doing some writing from there. So get yourselves comfortable. How they found the magic wood. There were once 3 children called Joe, Beth and Frannie. All their lives they had lived in a town, but now their father had a job in the country, so they were all to move as soon as they possibly could. What fun to be in the country, said Joe. I shall learn all about animals and birds. And I shall pick as many flowers as I want to, said Beth. And I shall have a garden of my own, said Frannie. When the day came for the move, all the children were excited. A small van came to their door and 2 men helped their father and mother to pile everything into it. When it was full, the van drove away and the children put on their coats and hats to go with their mother to catch a train to the station. Now we're off, cried Joe. The country, sang Beth. We might see fairies there, said Frannie. The train whistled and chuffed out of the station. The children pressed their noses to the window and watched the dirty houses and the chimneys race by. How they hated the town. How lovely it would be to be in the clean country with flowers growing everywhere and birds singing in the hedges. We might have adventures in the country, said Joe. There will be streams and hillsides, big fields and dark woods. Oh, it will be lovely. You won't have any more adventures in the country than you will have in the town, said their father. I dare say you will find it all very dull. But that's where he was quite wrong. My goodness, the things that happened to those 3 children. They arrived at last at the tiny station where they were going to get out. A sleepy-looking porter put their 2 bags on a trolley and said he would bring them along later. Off they all went down the winding country lane, chattering loudly. I wonder if we've got a garden, said Frannie. But before they reached their new home, they were tired out and could not bother to say a word more to each other. Their cottage was 5 miles from the station, and as the children's father could not afford to do anything but walk there, it seemed a very long way indeed. There was no bus to take them, so the tired children dragged their feet along, wishing for a glass of warm milk and a cosy bed. They must have been very tired. At last they got there, and dear me, it was worth all the walk, for the cottage was sweet. Roses hung from the walls, red and white and pink, and honeysuckles all around the front room. It was lovely. The van was at the door, and the 2 men were moving all the furniture into the little house. Father helped, whilst Mother went to light the kitchen stove to make them all a hot drink. They were so tired that they could do nothing but drink hot milk, eat some toast and tumble into their roughly made beds. Joe looked out the window, but he was too sleepy to see properly. In 1 minute, the 2 girls in their small room were asleep, and Joe too, in his even tinier room. What fun it was to wake up in the morning and see the sun shining in at strange windows. It didn't take Joe, Beth and Frannie very long to dress. Then they were out in the little garden, running through the grass that had grown so long and smelling the roses that had grew all around. Mother had cooked eggs for them and they ate their breakfast hungrily. It's lovely to be in the country, said Joe, looking out of the window to the faraway hills. We can grow vegetables in the garden, said Beth. There will be glorious walks all around, said Frannie. That day, everyone helped to get the little house straight and tidy. Father was going to work the next day. Mother hoped there would be someone to give her washing to do. Then she would make enough money to buy a few hens. That would be lovely. I shall collect the eggs each morning and evening, said Frannie happily. Let's go out and see what the country round about is like, said Joe. Can you spare us for an hour, Mother? Yes, run along, said Mother. So off the 3 children went, out of the tiny white front gate and into their lane. They explored all round about. They ran across a field where pink clover was full of bees. They paddled in a small brown stream that chattered away to itself under the willow trees in the sunshine. And then they suddenly came to the wood. It was not far from their cottage at the back. It looked quite an ordinary wood, except that the trees were a darker green than usual. A narrow ditch separated the wood from the overgrown lane. A wood, said Beth in delight. We shall be able to have picnics here. It's rather a mysterious sort of wood, said Joe thoughtfully. Don't you think so, Beth? Well, the trees are rather thick, but they seem about the same as any others, said Beth. They don't quite, said Frannie. The noise the leaves makes is different. Listen. They listened, and Frannie was right. The leaves of the trees in the wood did not rustle in quite the same way as other trees nearby did. It's almost as if they were really talking to one another, said Beth. Whispering secrets, real secrets that we just can't understand. It's a magic wood, said Frannie suddenly. Nobody said anything. They stood and listened. Wisher, 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 said the trees in the wood and bent towards one another in a friendly way. There might be fairy folk in there, said Beth. Shall we jump over the ditch and go in? No, said Joe. We might get lost. Let's find our way around before we go into big woods like this. Joe, Beth, Frannie. Suddenly came their mother's voice from the cottage not far off. It's time for lunch, time for lunch. The children felt hungry all at once. Of course they did. They forgot the strange wood and ran back to their new home. Mother had new bread with strawberry jam for them and they ate a whole loaf between them. Father came in as they were finishing. He'd been shopping for Mother in the village 3 miles away and he was hungry and tired. We've been exploring everywhere, Father, said Beth, pouring him out a big cup of tea. We found a lovely wood, said Joe. The trees really seem to be talking to one another, Father. That must be the wood I've heard about this afternoon, said Father. It has a strange name, children. What is it called? Asked Joe. It's called the Enchanted Wood, said their father. People don't go there if they can help it. It's funny to hear things like this nowadays, and I don't expect there is really anything strange about the wood, but just be careful not to go too far into it in case you get lost. The children looked in excitement at one another. The Enchanted Wood, what a lovely name. And each child secretly thought the same thought. I shall go and explore the Enchanted Wood as soon as I can. Their father set them to work in the overgrown garden once they'd finished their meal. Joe had to pull up the tough thistles and the 2 girls had to weed the untidy vegetable bed. They spoke to one another in joyful voices. The Enchanted Wood. We knew there was something magical about it. I guess there were fairies there, said Frannie. We'll do some more exploring as soon as we can, cried Beth. We'll find out what those whispering trees are saying. We'll know all the secrets of the wood before many weeks are past. And that night, at bedtime, all 3 stood at the window looking out on the dark, whispering wood behind the cottage. What would they find in the Enchanted Wood? So that's the first chapter of our new book, The Enchanted Wood. And now we're going to see whether we can do some writing from that chapter. So now we're going to see whether we can use that first chapter to write a letter. And we're going to write it as either Joe, Beth or Frannie. So you can choose which child you'd like to write the letter as. So in their perspective. We're going to be writing it to their grandma or granddad or both. So looking at the first chapter, I wrote down some of the things that happened. So they woke up, Mum gave them eggs for breakfast, which they loved. They played in their garden and then they wanted to go and explore elsewhere. So they went to explore, they went through a field with pink clover in it, they paddled in a little stream and then they came to the Enchanted Wood. And remember that Joe, Beth and Frannie felt like that wood was slightly different. The trees were thicker and the noises they were making didn't sound like normal leaves blowing in the wind and whistling. It sounded like whispering. So they really thought that this wood was slightly different to a normal wood. They thought that it was more magical. Then they went home from lunch because their mum called them. They had a whole loaf of bread and jam and their dad got back and he asked them about their day and they mentioned the wood. And the dad had said that it was called the Enchanted Wood and that most people didn't like going in there. They could get lost, so to try and stay away from it. We know that at the end of that chapter that actually the children really, really want to visit the wood and they're actually at the end of it looking outside the window thinking about the Enchanted Wood and all the adventures they could have. So we're going to write a letter to Grandma and Granddad from Joe, Beth or Frannie, basically telling them what's happened since they've come to the new house. Now, it's going to be quite an informal letter, but when we start off the letter we need to make sure that we've got the addresses. So these are addresses that I've made up that you can steal and use. In the book, we don't actually know exactly where the cottage is and we don't know where they've come from. We know they've come from a town, but we don't know which town and we don't know where their cottage is in the countryside. So I've done it in Buckinghamshire. So this is the address of Joe, Frannie and Beth at the cottage they're at now. And then for Grandma and Granddad's address, I've done an address in Coles Hill, because that's a town. So we always start off with dear, and we're going to say dear Grandma and Grandad. Now, Grandma and Grandad both need a capital letter. It's a name, so dear Grandma and Grandad. Oh, sit it on the line, Miss Bailey. And then we put our comment in. So, dear Grandma and Grandad. Now, because it's an informal letter, because it's to somebody that the children know really well, and they're just telling them exactly what their day was like yesterday, does it need to be, I am writing to you to suggest, or I am writing to you to inform, or I'm writing to you to argue? We can actually be a bit impersonal. We're going to be thinking about what Joe, Frannie and Beth would like to actually ask their Grandma and Grandad. Have they got any questions? And we're going to be writing it in chronological order when we're saying what Joe, Beth and Frannie have done. So I'm going to put, dear Grandma and Grandad, how are you? And because that's a question, I'm putting a question mark at the end. So, how are you? We are missing you lots. And so I'm going to put, we are missing you lots and wish you were here. Then I'm going to turn over and we're going to carry on. So we're talking about the house now. So you might do a little paragraph about what the house looks like. So remember, they've come from a dusty town with lots of pollution. They hate the town to a beautiful countryside. So they might talk about how beautiful the cottage is, how small their room is, what the garden's like, or whatever you like. So that's going to be my first section. So I've done my addresses. I've started, dear Grandma and Grandad, how are you? We are missing you lots and wish you were here. The house. So I'm going to say the cottage is beautiful. And that's one of those tricky words for year 2 as well. And I always tell my children to say B-E-A-U-T-ful. So B-E-A-U-tiful. The cottage is beautiful. You'd love it. So you'd, contraction of you would. Love it. There are red and pink flowers everywhere and hills for miles. So the cottage is beautiful. You'd love it. I might even put an exclamation mark there. There are red and pink flowers everywhere and hills for miles. It's so, and I'll extend that out to emphasise, so much nicer than Coles Hill. And because Coles Hill is a name of a place, it needs a capital letter. So I've said a little bit about the cottage there. Again, you could extend that out even further. Talk about their room, talk about what the windows are like, what the doors are like, is there a secret compartment that they found, what the kitchen's like. But I've just done a little one just to show you about this paragraph. So the cottage is beautiful, you'd love it. There are red and pink flowers everywhere and hills for miles. It's so much nicer than Coles Hill. Then if I leave a line, so you can see here, imagine we've got a line running along here. We started the day eating eggs, and then we played, and think about a game you might play with your brothers and sisters. So then we played hide and seek. So then we played hide and seek. In our garden. You might say, Beth won per usual because she cheated. So I'm giving a bit of more information about what I've done. So if we go back, right to the beginning. Dear Grandma and Grandad, how are you? We are missing you lots and wish you were here. The cottage is beautiful. You'd love it. There are red and pink flowers everywhere and hills for miles. It's so much nicer than Coleshill. We started the day eating eggs and then we played hide and seek in our garden. Beth won per usual because she cheated. The next part that we might put then in is talking about the fact that they then went and explored. So you might say, after that, because we're using our time collected in chronological order, Beth Joe and I, because I'm writing as Frannie. So after that, Beth, Joe and I went to explore our new area. And this is where you're saying the things that they did. We ran quickly, or whatever adverb you want to use. We ran across fields that were full of flowers. I'm going to use a comma. Jumped over a freezing cold stream and discovered, so I don't need a comma because I'm using and, a strange wood. Now I'm going to talk about why that wood's strange. So it didn't look like a normal wood. The trees were thicker, and also it was as if the leaves were whispering to one another in their own language. How strange. So I put in there another paragraph. After that, Beth, Joe and I went to explore our new area. We ran across fields that were full of flowers, jumped over a freezing cold stream and discovered a strange wood. In that same paragraph, you then might talk about what the wood was like, what you could hear, what you could see. Was there moss on the ground growing everywhere? Was there owls in the trees making noises or chattering to one another? And then once you've done that, your final paragraph, which I'm not going to model for you because that's what you're going to be doing now, is talking about going back home for lunch and Dad saying it's called the Enchanted Wood and not to go in it. And that your character, either Beth, Joe or Frannie, really wanting to go and visit the wood again, having questions. We're going to go there tomorrow. What might we find? What adventure might we have? Or adventures what people or things magically might we meet. So thinking about those things. So you might do a paragraph now about going home, having the jam and the bread with Dad, and Dad saying that, oh yes, the wood that you found, it's called the Enchanted Wood, please don't go in there. And that inside you're really thinking, I'm gonna go there tomorrow and have a little look just to see what it's like. And then you might say about going to bed, or you might not. You might say, I'll hope to hear from you soon, love Beth, or love Frannie, or love Joe. So I'll do my other paragraph about what I've done. Then I might do my final paragraph. Hope to hear from you soon. Love, because it's informal. And then you might put Frannie or Beth. So on my one, I'm going to do Frannie. Just like that. So see whether you can now create your own letter in perspective of Joe, Frannie or Beth using these features. So you need to start with dear. Really important. So dear Grandma and Grandad. It needs to be written in chronological order. So what did they do? And in the order that they did it. It needs to have questions. Remember, it's informal. They will have questions for their grandma and granddad. So imagine if you couldn't speak to your grandma and granddad on the phone now, or other loved ones that you've got that you might not have seen during the coronavirus lockdown, that you might want to ask them. So for example, they're writing a letter rather than phoning or texting. So what might you want to find out if you hadn't seen a loved one for a while? So for example, how are you? What are you doing? When are you coming to visit us? What's the weather like in wherever they are? So questions. So asking how they are. What have you been up to? Are you missing us? We also want detail, so adjectives, really important, so you can create a picture in the reader's mind. So Grandma and Grandad can actually see that beautiful field of pink flowers, or can see that enchanted wood that you've described. We want paragraphs, so leaving that line in between each of the paragraphs when we're talking about something new that they've done. We need the close at the end, so hope to hear from you soon, look after yourselves, love Beth, love Frannie, love Joe. So finishing with love. We've got some of the ones before the dear, so we've got addresses, making sure they're on the correct side as well. We've got the date, so the person you're writing to knows when it was sent, because it can take a bit of time from you writing it and putting it in the letterbox to actually get into that person, so they need to know what day it was actually written on. To see whether now you can make your own letter in the perspective of Joe, Frannie or Beth. Thank you.